Welcome to Module 6 of the Mercado Institute of International Trade's Import Training Program entitled Ocean Transportation. Let's begin by running through our module objectives. Number 1, we want to present ocean transportation as a vital component of a U.S. import supply chain. 90% of the world's trade is conducted via maritime transport, so needless to say, in the United States, ocean transportation is critical to the import supply chain. We want to offer a multifaceted portrayal of all the players and activities involved in a U.S. ocean import program, and there are many of them. We want to enhance the students' understanding of the operational, service, and documentation components of importing into the U.S. via ocean transport. And then finally, share both tactical and contractual expertise that enhances an importer's knowledge of all aspects of inbound ocean transportation. And by contractual, we mean negotiating contracts with steamship lines and non-vessel operating common carriers. We have an aggressive agenda. It's actually contained in 2 slides, so let's get right into it. We have some opening comments, and then we'll provide a brief history of U.S. ocean transportation, a rather fascinating part of how global trade has evolved over the last 70 years. Third bullet, we'll take a deep look at who the ocean transportation players are, what makes up the ecosystem, the steamship lines, the carriers, the importers, etc. Then we'll get into the Federal Maritime Commission, the U.S. government entity that monitors and regulates ocean transportation in the U.S. We'll take a deeper dive into ocean carriers, the steamship lines as they're often called, and then a really deep dive into the freight forwarder and the non-vessel operating common carrier, which can be one and the same, but we'll get into that in upcoming slides. We're going to study pricing models in some detail as well, baked into the first 2 bullet points: full container load, FCL pricing models, basically how price determinations are made and what comprises the pricing itself. Less than container load as well. We're going to do a little bit of math in this module too, getting into the calculation of what is called weight versus measure, accounting for dense cargo versus voluminous cargo. Very interesting part there. A full-on multiple section approach to import documentation, bills of lading, forwarders, cargo receipts, etc. Second to the last bullet, negotiating ocean contracts with carriers and NVOCCs. We just mentioned that a moment ago. And then best practices for U.S. importers. Let's get down to work. We do have some important opening comments to make, so we'll begin there. Module 6 of this training program is the first related specifically to international transportation. We've certainly talked about ocean transport and air freight and even trucking and intermodal, but certainly not in the level of detail that we're going to jump into here. Subsequent modules will deal with other modes of transport. For now, we're talking about ocean transportation. Second bullet. Beginning now, the next few modules will address the primary modes of transportation associated with importing into the U.S., elaborating on what we just said. Maritime transport, also known as ocean freight, we'll use those 2 terms interchangeably. A full-on complete module on international air freight, and then truck and intermodal transportation in the United States that really completes the inbound logistics chain. As a note, and this is pretty important, import operating models like buyer's consolidation, transload, and direct-to-store will be covered in a separate module, actually the one that comes after ocean transportation. If you're not familiar with this terminology, you will become very familiar with it, and it's just ways in which importers execute on their strategic initiatives, how they move freight inbound, basically. Very interesting module coming up there. But it's so complex that we wanted to present it individually and not as part of the ocean transportation module. Before we begin, it is important to provide some guidance on the scope and definitions of topics specific to global trade. We just want to clarify because, again, in the next 3 modules, we'll be talking specifically about international transportation. First sub-bullet, transportation, basic stuff. The movement of goods between 2 points by a single or combination of modes, sometimes called multimodal or intermodal, from truck to rail to truck, from ocean freight to rail. That's what we mean by a combination of modes. Distribution, a little bit different, with an admittedly simplified definition, is the movement or storage of goods inside a facility, a DC, a distribution center, a fulfillment center. Obviously, goods have to come out of that DC, but distribution is very much about the handling of goods within a facility. Logistics, which we'll be talking about more in just one second, is the combination of transportation and distribution, and supply chain, which has been the overarching theme of everything we've talked about, is comprised of all of the above, plus those buy-side and sell-side activities that we've mentioned so frequently since the very beginning. A couple of important comments here too. For purposes of our training, transportation encompasses all activities up to the point of distribution in the United States. As such, we're going to look at origin, inland freight, and/or drayage, getting goods from a factory in Europe to a port of export, the main mode of transport itself, ocean freight here, air freight, and an upcoming module. And then, once goods arrive at destination, U.S. drayage and/or transport up to a domestic distribution center. And this is where it gets important. As a note, for us, our transportation modules do not cover transport from a USDC out to a customer or point of sale. Our story will end when an import gets to its point of distribution in the United States. Domestic transport, small parcel, less than truckload, full truckload out to customers, separate subject, we don't cover it here. Ultimately, our goal is to integrate all modes of transportation into a holistic inbound process. That's another overarching theme we've had from the very beginning. We're going to get into the details of how to do that in both this as well as upcoming modules. Also, our objective is to make sure that transportation functions are supporting and enhancing performance in areas like sourcing and purchasing. So we're not just interested in integrating transportation functions, trucking with ocean freight, with delivery in the United States. Integrated logistics also brings together other functions within the organization: sourcing, purchasing, accounting, even IT. In the end, transportation must contribute to achieving the 4 goals of supply chain management. And by now, we should know them by heart. Maximize our sales opportunities, right product, right place, right time, etc. Stabilize and/or drive down landed costs. Reduce and stabilize cumulative lead times. And manage our inventories. Those are the 4 objectives we've spoken of from the get-go. Those slides were intended to set the stage for our upcoming discussions. When we come back, it will be all about ocean transportation and, of course, integrated logistics programs. We have a good module here, so please come back as soon as you can.